This is culture. This is culture. This is culture. We gotta keep it together.
Hello, I am Anne Leonard, the Deputy Director of Culture, and I am so pleased that we are here today. I have my good friend, Miss Yvonne McTavia. She is with us to speak about a special project that we're about to launch. This TV program, This is Culture, is actually a relaunch of a program we started a few years ago. And we are so pleased that we are now on our way to making this a regular scheduled program for you, the members of the Virgin Islands community. The This is Culture TV program was actually launched in 2017 by our previous director, and we were able to record 2 episodes. So, in celebration of Virgin Islands Culture Week, we are back. Isn't that true, Yvonne?
Yes, Miss Anne. Today we are here to talk about the documentary that we'll be producing. The documentary is about our centenarians who have given so much to this community, who have done so much. Some have passed on, some are still alive with us today, to tell the tales of what happened in the years gone by. And some of our centenarians are persons who were in the educational field, in the sports field, in the craft field, in different fields of work in the British Virgin Islands. And one person I would like to talk about today and to highlight is Mr. William Reimer. He has been around for a lot of years and he's still around, thank God. And also Miss Anne will speak more about Mrs. Evelyn Christopher, the late Miss Evelyn Christopher, Mr. Foy, whom she visited in St. Thomas, and we hope to have a nice little wrap-up of our centenarians. And this is the reason why we are launching this program, so that the information can be kept, it can be preserved for generations to come.
And you know, when we started this mini documentary, the documentary which will highlight Virgin Islands centenarians, it was one initially at a press conference just recently. I said, after highlighting Virgin Islands centenarians at our 2018 VI Culture Week, we decided that we would take things a step further and actually produce a documentary. At that time, we said, we're going to probably be finished with this in 6 weeks. And it took us a bit longer than we expected, but we formed a planning committee, which was made up of yourself, of course, Miss Borta McKelly, Julia Smith from our office, Miss Joanne Hill as well. And we are now working with Miss Nikita Turnbull from GIS and myself. So we've been planning for several months. We've actually been out in the field visiting the centenarians and their families. And we've even traveled to the neighboring St. Thomas in the U.S. Virgin Islands, where we met and interviewed Mr. Alfred Foy. Mr. Alfred Foy is originally from Seacows Bay, but he currently lives in Agnes Fancy in St. Thomas. So the mini documentary that you will see, or members of our community will see, will feature currently 2 centenarians and one 99-year-old. The 2 centenarians, as you mentioned, are Mr. William Reimer of Wrong Hill, Mr. Alfred Foy, and Mrs. Evelyn Christopher, 99 years old. And meeting and getting to know Mrs. Christopher was a very special experience for me, because at 99 years old, I remember when we walked up to her house that morning before we started to interview her, we sat for a bit and we started speaking. And sometimes years takes a toll on one's body and spirit. And at 99 years old, when I walked in the living room and I saw Mrs. Christopher, it was as if though she was just one of the girls. And she joked, she shared so many life experiences with us. She spoke about a gale in years past. For those of you who may not know what a gale is, we didn't used to call these storms hurricanes all the time. We
Call them
used to
gale.
refer to them as gales. And in one gale, when she was a little child, was it maybe when she was 4 or 5?
Probably.
She mentioned that she had lost virtually her entire family in that gale, and she had survived. And one of the things I always remembered her saying when we started to speak about her life, she said, and we joked about it, she said, to know me and to live with me. Well, you can finish that one.
It's two different things.
It's two different things.
Yes.
So she was a person, and I said she was a person because unfortunately she passed away sometime
Recently.
after we had recorded
the
her
interview.
interview. So we express sympathies to her family, and may her soul rest in peace.
Yes, and I would like to add to that, Miss Evie was a cheerful person, and it was a privilege, I guess, for these young ladies to meet Miss Evie and talk about life in those days. It was also a privilege to visit Mr.
William Reimer.
Yes, Mr. William Reimer. He too is a very pleasant person. The only problem with Mr. William Reimer was, at his age, he could not remember certain things, but still had that zest to push on and to say what he remembered. It was such a joy and a privilege to listen to him. That information that you could have gotten out of him, that you got out of him, at that point in time. And Mr. Reimer too played his part in the history of this country. He was a horse owner. He was involved with horse racing. He worked for government. He traveled. He knew the whole history of the King Garden Bay and that side of the island. And when you speak to Mr. Reimer and you said certain things, it will prompt him and he would say, so and so is the case, even though he could not speak fluently. But it was a joy and pleasure to visit Mr. Reimer, and his children were there, and they too were excited about having us there to visit Mr. Reimer, to talk with him and to get some information concerning him and the territory as a whole. And I said, if Mr. Reimer could have talked like me or you today, he would have gotten much, much, much information because he was already prompt.
Right.
He knew. And there's one thing I can say about Mr. Reimer. Mr. Reimer calls on his Lord. He speaks about his God.
Most definitely.
And in all the interview and what have you, he talk about his God. And we encourage him to hold on to his master's hand.
And even though we were not able to have a full interview with Mr. William Reimer, and in November this month, he's actually going to be making his 103rd birthday. We decided that we would reach out to two of his sons, Mr. Allen and Dennis Reimer, and we were able to interview both of them, and they spoke so intimately about their father that that piece, excuse me, in itself was able to complement our visit at Mr. William Reimer's residence.
One of the things to his long life, as Dennis says, was the children, us. But we just patronize the way he handled his family with love and keep us together. And I mean, we try our best to make them happy. Because now I realize that stress have a lot to do with people's life. And they didn't have that with us. They didn't have that with us. And I think that contribute a lot to their long life. Because he went through a lot of sickness, but God was in control. and he kept him. He worked hard, and we worked hard with him. You know, he was a farmer, and my mother was a farmer with him, and we was right there. I mean, even though when we grew up, we moved away, went to the U.S. Virgin Islands, you know, for a better living, but we were still involved with their life.
Yes, Yvonne, one of the books I was reading recently, it's called Totola's Goal. I believe it was probably printed in like around 1997, and it was written by nurse Diana Walker Stewart. And she featured several persons in the community, and two of those persons were Mr. William Reimer and his lovely wife Josephine. So I would encourage persons, if they can get their hands on that book, that there's a wonderful bio there for Mr. William Reimer, and also his late wife Josephine. And the bio is written in both English and Spanish.
Which is good. Which is good. And as you mentioned about Mrs. Walker and her piece that she wrote on him, I'm encouraging persons right now, I'm taking this opportunity to encourage persons to save your funeral booklets, because they come in handy for purposes for this kind of research. Because when you're trying to find some information on somebody, the funeral booklet is be the first place you might be able to turn to find some information, because you have to go there and do some research with people and with other persons and what have you. But when you get information from, say, Miss Anne, and you get some from somebody else, you have to sit down and put it together to see if it blends. But information in the funeral booklet gives you a more accurate and up-to-date information about the person. You know, so I'm saying through that avenue, we can harness our history and don't throw away your funeral booklets or any other information that you have on the British Virgin Islands, because it comes in quite handy.
And you know, funeral booklets can pile up sometimes on you quite a bit. I know that there are persons even here in the territory, they may go to a funeral, but they don't even want to have a funeral booklet in their homes. But that's another
Issue.
episode for
Yes.
another TV show. The HLS, H. Lavity Stout Community College, they can actually donate a copy of their loved one funeral booklet. And the genealogy center at the H. Lavity Stout Community College, you can actually go on the college's website, and there are many funeral booklets that one can actually peruse if they are doing research on various, trying to locate their family connections and what have you not.
Yes, and the other centenarian that we will be honoring or featuring is Mr. Fife from St. Thomas. And Miss Anne, since she had the privilege to go and visit him, I will let her speak more about Mr. Fife.
Well, first of all, when we got to Mr. Foy's home, he lives way over in Agnes Fancy. And he has a caretaker, Miss Webster, very delightful woman. And we sat on his balcony, a beautiful view overlooking Charlotte Amalie Harbor, speaking with Mr. Foy. Mr. Foy walks on his own. He's very porky. He cracks jokes all the time. His face, as far as I see, hardly a wrinkle. And I'm like, where is Mr. Foy? I don't see 100-year-old man sitting across from me. And I said that to him, and he said, "You're not the only one, young lady." As a matter of fact, I went to my doctor recently, and when I walked into the room or the doctor saw me, he looked at my file, he looked up, he looked at me again. So he said, "Doc, what's wrong? Is this your age? What age are you talking about, Doc, this age here, is that really your age? He said, yes. Why? He said, because you're 100 years old, but you look better than my mother who's like 70. And he just laughs. But he is accustomed to hearing that sort of thing. And he used to travel back and forth to Tortola quite frequently because he even mentioned that he comes over here to one of his doctors. So it was such a delightful visit to get to know Mr. Alfred Foy. He recently celebrated his 101 birthday just a month ago. And many persons think that as you age, you deteriorate. And some of these centenarians that we have met, I have the most admiration for some of them because to live 100 years alone and I won't reveal my age. I don't know if you might want to reveal yours
No, thank
to
you.
let persons know maybe how close to 100 we might be.
That's
But
true.
um, I consider myself to be a fairly young person, and the changes I have seen in these Virgin Islands over the last 30 years, it's like the landscape has changed
It's
so
true.
much.
That's true.
And to sit and imagine that, okay, so this person has lived 100
Yeah.
years.
What was it like, and what they envision for the next 100 years, or what you would envision the territory will look like for the next 100 years, if you're around for the next 100 years.
Exactly. And Berta McKelly, in one of our planning meetings, I remember her saying, it's looking at the Virgin Islands from donkey cats to Lexuses. So just think about the transition.
Yes, that's true. And the roads, there was not more pure dot roads. The houses were probably still thatch houses
There
and
was just one street,
street
which
and
was
what
Main
street.
Street.
Yes, and everybody had a little galvanized house, and houses were made from grass. So looking back at the territory from now and going back 100 years, that must have been a sight to see.
And as I sit and recall Virgin Islands history, they were here when the Danish West Indies would have been purchased by the United States
States.
in 1917. That person would have been here during the 1949 match and probably
Way
might have
before
very well been in the
in the match,
match
that's true.
themselves.
That's true.
They would have been here when Noel Lloyd and the Positive Action were fighting for Wickham's Key. They would have seen the Virgin Islands awaken from the bird sanctuary
Right, to what it is
to what
today.
it is today.
And a lot of them would have gone through different commissioners, because remember in those years we didn't have governors until recently. It was commissioners, it was administrators, and a lot of them have passed through those persons. So they can tell you, well, when Commissioner Cookshank was here, when Commissioner so and so was here. But the whole aspect, the whole cultural aspect of the BVI for 100 years has been changed, and it has been changed drastically. And while I'm speaking, I would like to also remember two other persons who are centenarians, Miss Emma Jane Creaky and Mrs. Smith, Inel Smith. They are also centenarians. And when we have such person in our midst, I think it's a pleasure and a privilege for us to go and seek them out and see what information that they can give us, because everybody experience is a little different to somebody else's experience, and growing up in the town, I believe they can give us some information about town, how town used to be, what town used to be in those days, because as I say, 100 years is not 100 days.
Thank you, Yvonne. Yvonne, the journey has been quite an interesting one, and I would like to thank you on behalf of the Department of Culture. I would also like to acknowledge the contributions made from the other persons who made up our planning committee, Mrs. Julia Smith, Ms. Berta McKelly. Joanne Hill also assisted in the initial stages as well. And I'm so pleased that we have finally been able to complete this documentary. And I want to thank you once again for everything that you've contributed to this particular project.
You're welcome. And I also would like to add, we are not doing this because, we want to do it. We are doing it for the preservation, for generations to come. Because when you're researching, it might be a great, great, great grandmother. It's, oh my, that's my great, great grandmother. And it opens up, well, I don't know about anybody, so I know for me, it opens up a tunnel and you want to go down that tunnel and you want to see what is down that tunnel when it comes to doing family research. And sometimes you find out it's your great 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 grandmother, but then you find out then it was your great aunt because of family connection. So in doing these projects, it helps to open up persons when it comes to the history of the British Virgin, because I find that if you turn around the block there and you turn around the block there, everybody's related, more or less. So I think it's a privilege that we have started this project, that we start this project, and I think we can go on further with it, and I think we should not end it here. It should be something continuous, because with the help of the good Lord and His mercies, we will have many more centenarians. And this project is a project of preservation, so it can be there for years to come.
I am Anne Leonard, and it's been a pleasure. This is Culture TV program, and the Department of Culture. We're excited. Please look forward for our next episode as we continue to bring culture to your home.
This is culture. This is culture. This is culture. We got to keep it together.